So I wanted to make this video based on the fact that it's proven to be a rather popular post on my Tumblr. Yes, hi, I'm on Tumblr if you want to read more ramblings on IDV lore, especially centered on Norton and Alice, with a splash of our beloved arsonist, and check me out on Tumblr. But I also want to talk about this because of recent tweets I've seen from perhaps the #1 Alice fan on Twitter. So I originally wrote this piece a few months ago before I even saw the likes of Cage of Yesteryear and its teaser, where we got to see slightly more lore and saw the reveal of Hunter Melly, aka Miss Queen Bee. Anyways, I've added a bit more to this video from my original post on Tumblr for those who have read it already, so you will still learn something a bit new. But now on to the actual video. So recently a couple of tweets have stumbled across my timeline, making me aware of the fact that there seems to be a lot of IDV players who simply don't like Alice as a protagonist. Here are the tweets in question. Names are covered for privacy, except Chia's because she's like the #1 Alice fan. But it's a bit baffling to me as someone who, from day one of picking up the game, came to like Alice first and foremost due to binging the main story in like one whole day. In addition, I picked up the game because of the Eve collab back in April, and wanted Eve, who coincidentally was given to journalists as a skin, so I was destined to be a journalist main anyways. At first, I thought I liked her just simply due to the fact that I actually enjoyed the main story, and because we saw mainly everything through Alice's eyes, so it was easier to connect with her. But the more I learned about her outside of that, the more I grew to love her as a character. Of course, the main story can't be overlooked. I can't take seriously the whole damsel in distress angle. A damsel in distress is a woman who needs to be saved, usually by a man or men, after falling into some peril or danger. Yes, Alice is in a dangerous situation at the manor, but who exactly is coming to her rescue? Orpheus is the one who set up the whole little farce and has drugged her multiple times on top of virtually emotionally and mentally manipulating her. Frederick doesn't care for Alice either, and most likely planned out what happened on the racecourse with Orpheus, considering Mary, or really Frederick, goes after Alice, who successfully is drugged into passing out. And then, when Norton arrives after Frederick's disappearance, he also chases Alice into a position of being chloroformed, and then he drugs her himself in the basement lab. Again, it was more than likely on Orpheus's orders, but he does it anyway, rather roughly I may add. And then there's Melly, who's the only one who shows any sort of concern for Alice's well-being in the affection system and her letters, but she doesn't actively do anything to help her besides warn Alice about Norton specifically, and drop some lore bombs about Orpheus. Yet, she is also rather suspicious herself, as she clearly knows more than what she lets on, and she has her own agenda for coming to the manor as well. But speaking of Melly, let me pause here to discuss some more recent tweets of Chia's that grabbed my attention. Now, with the addition of Hunter Melly, we finally see another identity switch in the game, and well, people are kind of disappointed in her design. I won't get too into it, as that's not the point of the video, and I also discussed it more in depth in another post of mine on Tumblr, cough cough, but most were thinking Melly would look more bug-like and perhaps even monstrous. On the other hand, we had people who ran with it and poked fun at Alice for being a simp or gooner, as we know that's through Alice being affected by the drugs that we see Norton, Orpheus, Melly, and Frederick as hunters. Again, I explained more thoroughly on Tumblr, but to put it more simply, we can make all the jokes we want about how Alice views the others as hunters, and don't get me wrong, I find most of the things I've seen as funny, but it's still quite telling of Alice's character and personality, especially when we look at how Orpheus sees Norton and Melly as hunters and the likes of go hunting. Alice has been shown time and time again that it's part of her nature to not to humanize anyone because she's a rather sympathetic and intuitive individual herself who has been through a lot. By the time she arrives at the manor, she has read, investigated, and connected with countless stories and people, which is virtually the whole IDV cast, present and future. Not only as a journalist, but as a person who can see behind the facade that the person themselves or that others have built up. We see this more explicitly and personally through the affection system, where she's able to even come to an understanding with Mr. Norton stay the hell away from me Gamble, who she can become allies with in Cage of Yesteryear. And knowing anything about that man, you can tell it's even incredible that she's able to even do that. Additionally, the vision of the hunters that we see in the main story isn't completely Alice's fault either. In the concept video for Fool's Gold, Seb, the creative director who helped develop Fool's Gold, Alice in Hullabaloo, mentions that the identity of a character and the character itself are somewhat akin to the concepts of id and ego, or the difference between how the participants perceive the character and his self-perception. This means that the way a Hentai identity switch is presented still aims to showcase aspects of themselves that are unique to their perception of themselves, if that makes sense. Whether that be Fool's Gold, Queen Bee, Nightmare, Hullabaloo, etc., the developers always aim to tell each individual story and characteristics through the physical representation of said characters. For the first three, Alice's own drugged perception of them is only part of the reason they're seen like that. Going back to the main story and seeing Alice amongst the others still remaining RIP to Frederick, it generally feels like Alice is truly on her own, and the girl only wants to find out the truth, but to the point she willingly puts herself in danger. I would even say Alice's pursuit of the truth makes her a bit foolhardy. She's headstrong and brave, but that has always shown to lead her into situations that comes at a cost to her own well-being. I think the self-confidence comes from the fact that Alice has a lot of experience from her career as a journalist. See, I feel as if people like the ones in the tweets from before see Alice as this petite little thing who is reduced to being an object of Orpheus' obsession and just serves as a MacGuffin of sorts to the general plot despite being the current protagonist of the story. And yet, she's also so much more. I've read a number of character birthday letters, and while I have a lot of catching up to do, practically every single character who's been around for at least 5 years, give or take, has an investigative letter written by Alice. Like, this girl has been around. This little journalist has been to places close to home, like around England and Scotland, to as far as Haiti, when investigating Patricia, for instance. Possibly even America as well. St. Louis to be exact when you take a look at Cowboy's 2024 birthday letter, though I may be misreading it, and it's actually the fact that she has connections there. Speaking of investigations, reading Alice's investigation notes on several characters, one can glean more of a glimpse into her personality, and I must say it's admirable. Not only does she take the time to write concise and detailed notes on each individual, but she does so with care, attentiveness to the character and their background, and sympathy, usually towards their plight, disappearance, or the ones that they left behind. While yes, Alice's notes can be read as her being purely observational and objective, if you read a little deeper into it, she's a very compassionate and intuitive individual who can see things that other characters and players, yes you, I'm talking about you watching this video right now, may miss. Here are some examples that stood out to me from Enchantress's 2025 and Forward's 2025 birthday letter. Perhaps it was the vow I made that helped. I tell them that if I failed to keep my word, Papa Legba could take my soul. I'm someone who rarely breaks promises, and truth be told, even without such a vow, I felt compelled to write about the suffering and resistance I had witnessed in the city. This was Alice trying to earn the trust of Cape Haitian citizens as a foreigner in their world. Moving on to Forward's letter. There were tales of their father teaching them to dissect frogs, only for William to smear their walls with the foul innards, of being made to recite the Hippocratic Oath, only for the pages to be torn out and folded into paper airplanes. I could scarcely imagine the shadow of such mischievous defiance cast upon young William's heart, and felt a pang of sympathy. This was Alice upon hearing how William's father smothered him and his brother with confinement, discipline, and a push towards the medical field, which William clearly did not want. But yes, the amount of investigation this woman must have done before going to the man is insane. It's a shame. Many, if not all, of the characters in IDV, whether they are a hunter or survivor, have or will be investigated by Alice. If it weren't for her, we wouldn't know more details or lore about any of these characters. To reduce her to nothing but a plot device for Orpheus, or to labor as a damsel in distress, is not only degrading to her character, but also an insult to the core of what makes up IDV's lore. Simply because there are those who may overlook the little intricacies revealed about her and everyone else in her investigations and the main story. Most don't even bother to read the lore properly and parrot what they've been told by others, especially if they have little regard for the character in question. Because let's be honest, most of us only have the capacity to care or dive deeply into a handful of characters in this game at most, especially considering how deep and how big the lore is. And there are plenty of others who only center their interest and obsession on one character in particular. That's fine, but it's unhelpful and damaging to turn around and act like you know a character you barely care about or have studied. I think about people like Cheer, who truly and deeply care for a character who the general community couldn't care less about when I say this, and who have clearly been hurt and upset by some of the generalizations made. by the general community. Yet, thanks to the anonymity and the fast pace of the internet and the rise of a generation that is purely digitalized, it makes sense there's increasingly lack of basic understanding and compassion and respect for one another. And this is shown most clearly in fandom spaces like IDV. Of course, IDV is not the only game that has issue with this, but this is an IDV video, so you catch my drift. Anyway, short ramble over. Let's return to Alice. I still have a bit more to say about her specifically before I end the video. So, for instance, people also easily forget Alice is technically a feral lady trained in the arts of espionage, such as lockpicking and disguise. Heck, she was supposed to go to the man in disguise, but decided not to after seeing her little Orphe doll. She decides to take it instead. She's a little too soft-hearted, I swear, but I also believe it's under the mark of her character being open and truthful to her manor mates, who she hopes will reciprocate in kind. Unfortunately, these skills came at the cost of an awful childhood and adolescence. Given she was both physically and mentally tortured at the White Sand Street orphanage turned asylum later on, before being adopted out to some medical researcher named William Lamb, who took her to Australia to experiment on her. It is also plausible that he also more than likely had her trained to be a feral lady like he did with Evelyn. Clearly, Alice's life has been far from being rainbows and roses. And through all that time, she had no one to rely on but herself. It is incredibly understated how amazing Alice is for even crawling through all that abuse, anxiety, and depression, and loneliness, and other such torturous experiences to become who she is today. I mean, look at Orpheus, who went through a similar experience, and see the man who he's become. Alice's character as a whole is so underappreciated by the larger community, and it's honestly saddening to me that she's ignored and treated with such apathy at worst and misunderstanding at best. Or she's just used as a prop in people's shipping wars, as shown by Chia here in one of her tweets. Of course, if you want to ship, then ship, go ahead. But it can be easy to see who ships her as a person as opposed to an item to further their ship fantasies or arguments or genders or what have you. But to look at her and label her as a boring plain Jane is honestly mind-boggling to me if you pay even a sliver of attention to her as a character. Heck, even NetEase doesn't seem to care about her that much outside the main story. Like, she's starving for some little TLC. Like, yes, she has her upcoming A-tier skin that's in the store, so you can't even get it after a certain amount of time until possibly next year, which is a little saddening to me as a newer player who has missed a ton already. I can only think about future journalist mains who are still going to be stuck with her deduction fit, or a plethora of B-tier skins. NetEase, please. But anyways, this is becoming longer than I thought it would be, so I'll end it here, but thanks for watching if you made it this far, and hopefully I'll be back with more videos like this in the future. Ciao for now.